Today on Falling Sun Acres, we're going to be taking this drawing and turning it into a mega shoe rack. And so we got to start out by breaking down materials. I've got a mixture of 3/4 inch sanded plywood, 1/2 inch sanded plywood, and 1/4 inch sanded plywood. And I'm going to use them for different purposes. The carcass of the structure is going to be made out of the 3/4 inch ply. The slide drawers, bottoms and sides are also going to be made out of 1/2 inch ply. And then the backing of the whole structure to keep it from moving around and racking is going to be made of 1/4 inch ply. And so here I'm just breaking down pieces into usable components. This thing was big. It was, I think, 40 inches wide, 24 inches deep, and 6.5 feet tall by the time everything was said and done. And it was maxing out my sliding miter saw. And so I was having to do the painter's tape trick, and doesn't always work out to keep from having little bits of tear out. I do find a little trick that I'll post in another video later for cutting a lot of those, because I needed 14 sliding drawers, which meant I was doing a lot of repeat cutting. And so I'll share that in another video. Pocket holes were the main joiner of things for this project, and had to get a little creative in some spaces to figure out how I could hide them so that they wouldn't be evident and just completely visible all the time. And so just little tricks like, hey, what wall am I going to have this thing butted up against? Which pieces of the wood are going to be visible? These are all things that I'm thinking about. And it's one of the reasons why you see the pieces of blue painter's tape on the pieces. I was identifying which ones were the best pieces and where they needed to go. That way, the best product would be showing in their home. So now that all the pieces are cut, it's time for us to stand this thing up and actually put it together. And I do almost all this stuff by myself. I mean, you saw my son help me cut some of the pieces. Every now and then I'm going to need a hand, but this is how I stand it up. I use my Bessey clamps just to give me like a starting stable surface. It's on top of a large sheet of one of the extra pieces of plywood. And then I'm going to use those corner clamps, those 45-degree corner clamps, to kind of put it together. It was hard to get a good view of like actually putting it together, but it was just pocket hole screws. At this point, I am marking everything out on the blue painter's tape. I don't know why I use the blue painter's tape other than, it's more visible, I guess, because I'm going to cover all of this stuff up with like face framing in the end. So it didn't really matter. But I used the tape just to make a template, so that way I knew exactly where every single one of my slides is going to be. I knew where my shelf was going to be, and then I could make sure that everything was going to be square and correct. And that was my biggest worry. So I used a lot of squares and clamps just to make sure everything is how it needs to be in terms of up and down and just being level and plumb. And here I'm using my clamp in an opposite nature. It allows me to push things together. I don't know if some people haven't seen that before, but you can turn the end around and then use it to push instead of to pull. And that's kind of nice when you got pieces that aren't 100% flat. They bow out a little bit or they cup a little bit. And I'm just joining the parts together at this point. And now it's time to start the marathon of just cutting pieces again and again and again. So we just got to set up a stopper, go ahead and cut all these pieces. These are going to be the pieces that hold the drawer slides in place. I'm not using hardware. Hardware would have maybe doubled the cost of this project, and I was trying to avoid that. And so it's going to take longer. It's going to take more work, but it's going to be a lot more cost effective for the person. So that's what we went with. And here I am using my traditional method of cutting long pieces like this. And again, I come up with, I think, a better way. Maybe it's specific to my saw, but I'll show this in another video later. But flipping it like 5 times every time I need to do this is kind of a pain. And all I'm doing here is I'm making the bases for the sliding drawers. And I'm making them out of 1/2 inch ply. These are going to be for shoes. And I don't know, I guess I could have gotten away with something thinner, but I have a set of drawers in my bedroom that have like 1/2 inch ply as the bottom, and I feel like they're constantly going to break and they feel really cheap and terrible. And I don't build anything light. It's just not something I have a talent for. I build things that are sturdy but heavy as like a rhinoceros. So, I think that's okay. And I think it's worth it. So here I made a template for all of my pieces, and I'm just going to go through and I'm going to pre-drill all these stinking pieces, and it's going to take quite a while. But this part wasn't as bad as having to sand all these pieces, which I did later. And so, yeah, I've been thinking about like which parts were the worst part of the project. Sanding and staining by far. Sanding, staining, and sealing. Those were definitely my least favorite portions of the project. Cutting and building are probably my favorite, and designing. Those are my favorite parts. But yeah, the sanding. Oh, so much sanding. And then the staining, that was, yeah, also, I need a better option. Maybe some kind of spray or something like that, just to make that faster and more streamlined. It seems like it takes forever. But yeah, it's time to sand. So there was some hand sanding for corners to make sure that there weren't any sharp edges or things that would drag. Um, I also waxed these things, that way they would slide kind of easily. I waxed the bottom of the drawer, and I waxed the portion that it was pulling through. I went through and sanded every single surface. Turned into a dust storm inside my shop. Doors are always open. I'm always wearing my RZ mask, which I think helps quite a bit. Maybe not perfect. Wouldn't mind having one of those things that fits around your entire head, because I think it'd be more comfortable, but it works pretty good. If anybody's got any good tips for keeping sawdust out of your eyes, I wear contacts or glasses, and I've tried using lots of different types of safety glasses, and I feel like it just gets up and around, and it just always seems to get there. I've also used vacuums attached to like the sander or the saw and things like that, and it just always seems to get in my eyes anyway. And so if you got like a better solution for that problem, let me know. Um, I'm looking for something like that. I feel like I've got like a pound of sawdust in my eyes every time I do anything, no matter how many precautions I take. And so here you can see I'm setting up the slides, and I start out by just putting the slides in. After I make one of the drawers, I kind of figure out that I actually don't just want one on the bottom. I actually want one on the top too. That way, when the drawer is pulled out, it cannot just fall forward. And so you can kind of see those on the left side. They're already installed there. But that was my concern, was that I was going to have some problems with little kids maybe pulling these drawers out and then everything just falling out onto the floor. And that kind of bothered me. I thought about it for a while, and this isn't like a full-time job or anything. This is a side deal, and I know you're thinking, yeah, I can tell, you're a complete and total amateur. But yeah, it was something I was concerned about with little kids maybe pulling on these drawers, having them fall out on them or something like that. And so I wanted to build some safety into it by having some catches to keep them from being able to tip out. You can pull the drawers completely out, which I think is nice because shoes get dirty. All of a sudden, the bottom of the drawer is dirty. And if you want to do some cleaning or something like that, you can take the whole thing out, shake it out outside, do your cleaning outside, and then bring it back in. You can also like reorganize quickly that way. Take the whole thing out, set it down, put the shoes in the way you want them, and then set it back in if you wanted. So that was kind of what I was thinking for that. And so in the background, you can see I've got the bases for those drawer slides in. And now I'm working on the sides of the drawers. I didn't think I needed anything too steep since these were going to be for shoes. And I did some research. I took some of my shoes. I took some of my wife's 10,000 shoes and looked and saw like how tall they were, how much. And then I came up with about a 2-inch base piece here. And so 2-inch height is enough to catch pretty much any shoe. There is a section for boots down at the very bottom of this thing. That's why it's a little bit bigger. And then at the top of the design, there's going to be some pull-out basket kind of things for hats, gloves, mittens, stuff like that. So kind of like a shoe storage mega thing. It's a little bit like a haul tree without the storage for coats. I don't know, either way, I think it turned out pretty good. But this is my process for making all of the drawers that slide out. And it was super slow at first because I was just kind of working my way through it, figuring it out. I'm going to use a little bit of glue. I use some of the extra pieces of the side pieces just to make sure things fit correctly. Sandwich them in place, and then I use my nailer just to very quickly fasten them. Once they're fastened in place with the nailer, then the glue will take its toll and do its job. It was tough to make sure that I didn't get glue in places I didn't want glue because it's not stained yet, and if you do that and you get some squeeze out and stuff, that is going to affect the look. But for the most part, it didn't have too many issues. I had a couple of drawers where it wasn't maybe the best, but yeah, it's one of those processes. It's going to take a long time, and so the first one took quite a long time, and then I get into a rhythm, and then it just kind of starts to work together pretty well. I probably could have done this next step maybe all in one go, make the sides, and then go ahead and glue the bottom on and nail it in too. But for whatever reason, I didn't. I don't know. I'm a step-by-step kind of person, and I guess I just thought it would be better to let them dry or tack up a little bit before putting the bottoms on and then gluing them in place. Some of the bottoms end up being just a little bit too wide, and that's just a product of doing repeat cuts that aren't like 100% perfect. And but I get things squared up. We add a couple of nails. I think I had, out of 14 slide drawers, I only had one nail come through. And so I was pretty impressed with that because that's not my typical experience. I feel like usually there are a couple six. But yeah, it went pretty well. It holds really good. Everything feels nice and sturdy and solid. And you might be looking at it and going, that's kind of ugly. I can see all the plywood and stuff, but it is going to be face framed for the whole project. And then on the fronts of these drawers, they're going to have a face on them too. That's going to be made out of poplar, and it'll be stained as well. And it looks much nicer than the current product. But yeah, you can see here, this is the piece that I was talking about. I'm adding that safety piece. I just got a little spacer here just to give it some space. But when you pull that drawer out, it will not be able to just tip out and fall, which I was a big fan of. Didn't want this to fall out on somebody's feet or their toes or something like that. And so these spacer pieces are going to be nice. They're going to catch that when that happens and just not allow it to go forward. And you might be looking at this and wondering, like, how in the world are you going to like cover this stuff up? And that was a unique challenge. And unfortunately, I didn't get all of it on video. But you'll see how I cover up with face frame, and I thought it was pretty creative, and I think it looks cool. And so lots and lots of these. Again, I got 14 drawers, which meant that for every drawer, I had 2 slides on the bottom and then the 2 safety catches on the top. And so, yeah, there's 28 of the slides for each one of those, and then there's 28 of the catches for each one of those. The pieces that made up the sides, it was a ton of extra cutting. But this is kind of how I end up cutting out all the grooves that I need so that things fit and that the drawers can slide through. I wanted them to be able to slide through, and it was something I wasn't sure if I could do. Like, I was like, I don't know if I can do that or not, but in my mind, that was the only way to do it and make it look cool. So you kind of see it there. I've got the face frame on already, and it covers up those slide pieces from the side. You can't really see them if you're looking straight on. And then I'm just adding a round over detail. The hand sanding was a lot. Everything needed to be hand sanded for this part. And all these corners I had to go through with a file because those roundovers and corners, you guys know that they don't work very well. It doesn't leave like a nice corner, and so I had to go through and do some handwork on every one of those. But it's one of those deals where you put your ear protection on that's got Bluetooth capability, and you either listen to a podcast, a book, or music, and before you know it, the task is done. So not that big a deal. So it's time to add those face plates to the drawers. And you can see I'm using poplar, and the grain matches from left to right. I made sure that the pieces were matching when I was cutting them. That way it could be a thing. And I think it looks super nice. I'm just pre-drilling 2 holes with a countersink bit, and then adding, I think they're 1-inch screws. They could be 1 1/4 inch screws. I went through a ton of fasteners on this project. Um, Lots and lots and lots of fasteners. But making sure that this all lined up and worked out the way that I wanted is probably the thing that I am the most proud of, because it was the thing I was thinking about the most with this project. And it was also the thing I was the most nervous about, but I thought it was the coolest detail that they slid into those pieces. And I think most people, when they would look at it, they might not even really think about it. But for me, that was a huge challenge. And so to have that line up and work out, I was completely thrilled. So, and as you can see, more hand sanding. It's a lot of fun. But I get visitors. You can see cats, dogs, my daughter, my son, chickens. Sometimes my wife comes out. And then comes the part I hate the most. So, finishing. Pre-stain conditioner first, just to make sure that I don't end up with like a blotchy stain. And then they wanted it to be like a dark walnut kind of look, and so I went through a bunch of dark walnut stain, but every one of the 14 drawers had to be pre-stained and then stained, and then sealed, and then some sanding, and then sealed again. So it was a lot. I should have purchased something to spray the sealer on. I didn't, but I think that's going to be my next big spend, is going to be on something that I can apply sealer or shellac or varnish or something. That way it's a quicker process, because the faster I can do those kinds of things, the quicker I can get these projects out and just work better altogether. And so the one thing I did find that I thought worked the best was I am using a specific staining sponge, and that thing worked great compared to trying to use like a rag or something. And so here you can see it like partially assembled and partially stained. There's the complete product, except for the bottom. The bottom's not on there yet because I have to put it in place first at the location and then measure to see, with shimming and doing things like that, I wanted to make sure that it fit perfectly. But yeah, here you can see when the poplar takes the pre-stain, it was pretty. And I was a little sad to stain it. Um, I think the natural color would have looked really good on this piece, but it wouldn't have matched anything in the house. And so, that's one of the things you got to do. You got to match the other things that are in and around. So, yep, just going through the process again of pre-finish, stain, and then sealer. So unfortunately, I didn't get any video of actually installing this project. I've got some finished parts here at the end. I always think it's a weird question to ask, can I film me putting something into your house? It's a little awkward. And so I didn't, but I'm guessing they would have been okay with it. They're super nice people. They were very patient with the process, and they trusted me to put this thing together, which is pretty awesome. So I got to build something out of almost my imagination. and started with a picture. I turned that into a drawing. I turned that drawing into pretty much a reality. And then I also added a piece on the side. They had some laminate there, and we decided that it'd look better if we matched it. And so kind of a complete thing there. So they're happy. I'm happy. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.